This is James from Cinemassacre, and you're listening to Mike the Birdman Dodd and the rest of the crew right here on ThisWeekInGeek.net. Crank that shit up.
Did you grow up with the NES, PlayStation, Star Wars, cartoons, and 80s TV? Do you like to think who would win in a fight between Batman and the Master Chief? Comics, games, movies, music, and TV. They're gonna tell you everything you need. Superheroes or not, they got your back. They're gonna save the world of geeks. Comics, games, movies, music, and TV. They're gonna tell you everything you need. Superheroes or not, they got your back. They're gonna save the world of geeks. This week in geek. This week in geek.
Hey guys, what's going on? You are listening to This Week in Geek, and I'm your host, Mike the Birdman Dub, and I'm not alone on this journey into the dream world. Dare I say, down a certain familiar street located in almost every city in the world. I am joined with the infamous, the, dare I say, uneven
Ryan the Uneven Flow Merkley.
So Ryan, thank you for coming on to the October topic show. But we're also actually joined by somebody special, somebody who may in fact be known as a film nerd. He may in fact play some shitty games that suck ass. We're joined with,
Hey, it's James from Cinemassacre.
which is awesome. So James, big thank you to taking time out of your very busy schedule. I mean, from doing Monster Madness to doing nerd videos and Spike TV stuff. It's a big honor to have you on the show tonight.
Oh, sure. Thanks. Thanks for having me.
So, guys, I guess this month's topic show for ThisWeekInGeek.net will be, we're going to be talking about the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. The new remake just got released out on Blu-ray on October 5th, and I figured what better time to talk about Freddy Krueger than during the month of October. I mean, I guess we could have done the My Little Pony franchise show, but that'll be next October. Ask me if I'm kidding. That's the funny thing. So I guess let's kind of go down the list here, see what everybody else has been doing. So for TWIG, over the last little while, myself, I've been working on reviewaday.ca, which we just got started right back up. I think we're on episode 114 as of tonight. And been doing really well at that. Still working over at the GameHeroes.com. Been doing a lot of stuff with like ScrewAttack.com for hard news recently. And other than that, just kind of been picking away at whatever projects I've been doing. Maybe have some big website news in the next little bit. But you know me, guys. I'm a workaholic. So Ryan, what have you been doing over the past month for those of us that only join us for our topic shows?
On Sundays, I co-host a show that you occasionally, usually, pretty much always appear on. It's on the Nerd News Network for TWIG. TWIG, by the way, is ThisWeekInGeek.net. That is the site. You can find all of my work and Mike's work and other Mike's work. But aside from that, playing a lot of Fallout, trying to finish New Vegas. I am now many, many hours into it. And picked up Dogfighter today. I'm sure that's going to cut into my time. And aside from that, just general gaming and work. Not a whole lot of special, aside from recording this special, I guess.
And James, I know you're always super busy, so what have you been working on over the last month or so?
Well, this month's been Cinemassacre's Monster Madness, which actually, Mike, you did a voice for one of them. One of the voice intros.
I was on Night of the Demon, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's all I've been doing, really, which is like every year when I do that, it's like a video suicide. It's just like, you know, just this crazy, like, endurance of just, you know, doing a daily video every single day of the month. There's like a 3 to 4 minute, I don't know, like review of a like weird, crappy horror movie. Sometimes a classic, or sometimes one that's not so much. So it's just one big like clusterfuck of videos.
Now, when do you start producing those? Like, do you do these months in advance, or do you do them literally every single day?
Yeah, I mean it's in advance. It takes like half the year really if you add it all up. So yeah, it's like after, you know, watch all the movies and take all the notes, and some of the movies I'm more familiar with than others, and the ones I'm less familiar with, it gives me an excuse to watch them. And so I basically do a lot of research. I write them all, and then I have to, like, record them, and then the editing happens. So yeah, all that pretty much takes like months in advance.
Good
Well,
Lord, I cry like a little girl whenever I have to edit one of the shows for Mike, and that's only like a few hours a week. Of course, does your showrunner pay you? Because mine, we'll talk about that off air.
Thanks,
Okay.
Brad. But I gotta say, James, you're probably the reason I stay up every morning until 4 a.m. Eastern, because that's usually when the new ones are posted. I'm thinking, I just want to go to bed, but I want to see this first.
Yeah, I do it that way, so that I'm not forced to, like, I don't force myself to stay up and make sure that it goes up without a hitch and everything. So I always check it in the morning, but I do that on purpose so that I'm, like, deliberately asleep and not worrying about it.
So you're the reason I don't sleep, James. Thanks. But guys, so I guess that's pretty much what we have been doing over the last little while. Like everyone's always super busy. So guys, I guess without any further ado, I guess I would love to thank our sponsors that make this show possible. Obviously, would like to thank JustPushPlayArcade.com, located in Creemore, Ontario, where I actually just had my 29th birthday party. It was pretty awesome. All the pictures are up on Facebook, which you can find at facebook.com/BirdmanDodd. Also, ConsoleRepairGuy.com. Joel, basically, if shit goes wrong, call Joel at ConsoleRepairGuy.com. And lastly, which provides us with monthly or weekly video game reviews, is GameAccess.ca, Canada's online video game rental service. Use promo code TWIG to get an extra 5 days added to your free trial. What can I say? That's pretty awesome. Also, I guess that's pretty much about it, guys. So before we jump into this month's topic show of Nightmare on Elm Street, here are just the facts. Teenagers of the world, don't close your eyes, don't lay down your head, and certainly don't fall asleep. Freddy Krueger has been invading the dreams since being created by Wes Craven for 1984's A Nightmare on Elm Street. That original film has gone on to spawn 8 more films, a series of novels, a television series, and a variety of comic books and crossovers. The original film was written and directed by Wes Craven. The story focuses on Freddy Krueger attacking Nancy Thompson and her friends in their dreams in the fictional Springwood, Ohio. Here, Krueger's backstory is revealed by Nancy's mother, who explains he was a child murderer and the parents of Springwood killed him after Krueger was acquitted on a technicality. Nancy defeats Freddy by pulling him from the dream world and stripping him of his powers when she is no longer afraid of him.
Just tell us what you want, all right? Yeah, I'm here to help you.
Help yourself, fucker!
Freddy returns to attack the new family living in the Nancy Thompson house in 1985's A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. Freddy possesses the body of Jesse Walsh and uses him to kill others until Jesse's girlfriend helps defeat Krueger's spirit once again. Wes Craven would return to write A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors. Freddy is now systematically killing the last of the Elm Street children until they're aided by a doctor in a mental institution who teaches the kids to find their inner dream powers to fight back and defeat Krueger once and for all. The story continues on in 1988's A Nightmare on Elm Street 4 The Dream Master. This time, Freddy is released and continues his killing spree until the power of the Dream Master is used to rip the souls that Freddy has taken out of his body, killing him in the process. Picking up shortly after the events of The Dream Master, A Nightmare on Elm Street 5 The Dream Child involves Freddy using an unborn child to resurrect himself and find new victims. The story of Freddy's conception was debuted here, and his own mother's instrumental in the killer's downfall in the film.
Wanna suck the face?
No.
Picking up shortly after the events of The Dream Master, A Nightmare on Elm Street 5 The Dream Child involves Freddy using an unborn child to resurrect himself and find new victims. The story of Freddy's conception was debuted here, and his own mother's instrumental in the killer's downfall in the film. 1991's Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare follows an amnesic teenager from Springwood who is sent to find Freddy's daughter Maggie, whom he needs to leave Springwood. Freddy's goal is to create a new Elm Street and begin killing sprees anew after killing off all the children in Springwood. Freddy's goal is to create new Elm Streets and begin a new killing spree after having killed off all the children in Springwood. Eventually, Maggie pulls Freddy out of the dream world and uses a pipe bomb to blow him up in 3D.
Get out of here now, please! Now!
Hey, you forgot the power glove!
Once again, Wes Craven returned to the Nightmare series with the new Nightmare in 1994. The film focuses on a fictional reality where Craven, Langenkamp, and England all play themselves, and where the character of Freddy Krueger is really an evil entity who's been trapped in the realm by fiction by all the movies that have been made. In 2003, director Ronnie Yu would make Freddy vs. Jason, which would pit Friday the 13th's Jason Voorhees against Freddy, as both characters are resurrected to do a battle royale with each other. With neither side claiming clear victory, it's still being debated by the fans.
Questions?
Yeah! What are you on? Looks like a frying pan and some eggs to me.
2010 would see a remake of the original Nightmare, but this time without series veteran Robert Englund, instead being replaced by Watchmen's Rorschach. That's right, Jackie Earle Haley in the role. Englund has portrayed the claw-wielding killer in a television series which began in 1988. The series Freddy's Nightmares ran for 44 episodes and occasionally featured Krueger as a driving influence behind the episode's events. Freddy's Nightmares was an anthology series, meaning a different story was told with a different cast of characters each episode. The show generally featured Freddy behind the scenes, but also had an episode which depicted Krueger's trial and his death at the hands of the parents of Springwood. While there were also 12 novels, which were not film adaptations, and 2 video games, the most common Nightmare item is easily the merchandise. Halloween costumes, action figures, collectibles, statues, clothings. The Nightmare on Elm Street series has inspired it all. NECA and Gentle Giant have recently begun prop replicas and statues, putting them on shelves against other merchandise made from other giants of the industry, like McFarlane Toys. No discussion of Nightmare on Elm Street is complete without the brilliant documentary on the series, Never Sleep Again. The doc from 2010 contained candid interviews and deleted scenes from the long-running series, but perhaps is best known for its candid look at the legacy of the franchise with people such as Bob Shea. After 26 years, the series shows no sign of its age. Every Halloween, Freddy Krueger's legacy continues to grow as new generations of horror fans are exposed to the psychological terror this franchise has excellently wielded for more than 2 decades.
Sticks and stones may break my bones, but nothing will ever kill me. Well, let's see now. First, they tried burning me. Then, they tried burying me. But this is my favorite. They even tried holy water. But I just keep on ticking.
And we're back to the TWIG Nightmare on Elm Street special for the month of October. And Mike, thanks for that summary. But one thing that's really sort of telling about this is how hard it is to summarize everything in this series. There's been a lot that's gone on screen. There's quite a bit that's gone on off screen. I mean, this franchise is, I mean, whenever I came into this, it was a lot bigger than I thought it was. I had no knowledge that they had done novels. I knew about the TV series. I didn't know it had run for the two years. But, I mean, aside from the movies, there's a ton of stuff out there.
Yeah, like, I remember way back in 2006, I think it was, maybe 2004, maybe 5, I'm not sure. Either way, it was in that little 3-year span. A company called Avatar Press, I think, had gotten a hold of the license to start doing horror comics. And the first one that I noticed was Nightmare on Elm Street. And I guess I was just coming off the high off of, I think it was Jason versus Freddy, and I don't know, I was just in a big horror mood, and I started kind of getting into the comic books, but I had no idea there were novels. I remember way back in the day, there were these Friday the 13th novels where people would find Jason's mask and be possessed by him and find his, like, machete, start cutting people up, stuff like that. So it's weird to see how big this franchise is, and thanks to James, I didn't even know there was a video game for the Commodore 64 or yeah, I had no idea that even existed. So this franchise has it's got such legs that it's really hard to condense it in just the 5 minutes here.
Both Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street had a Commodore game.
Which, it's weird because the Commodore seem to take more chances with their kind of licensed games as opposed to the Nintendo. I mean, they had a Transformers game that the NES didn't have unless you were over in Japan for whatever reason. Excuse me. But, well, guys, I guess let's kind of get started here. So let's talk about our memories with this, like, franchise. So who wants to go first, basically?
Ooh, me. Kill me first.
All right,
I mean,
Ryan.
do me first. Whoops.
Give her help.
For me, I don't have an awful lot of memories of this. To be honest, the first memory I can clearly remember the franchise is actually the television series, and that was '88. So I kind of got into
Wow.
the game late. Yeah. Well, I was 4 in 1984. Now I'm old and bitter, and life has beaten me down, but that's another story.
I'm still
In
trying to track down that show. It's only on Region 2 DVD as far as I know.
Oh, I was going to get to that later. I'm going to rant about that, trust
All
me.
right.
It's all because of the company behind it. Anyway, so I mean, my first exposure was the TV show. Now, to be perfectly honest, I've only gone through the films recently, partially because of this. I was never a big horror fan. I'm still not a big horror guy. There's just there's something about this series, particularly the characters, that's a lot more alluring than your average horror film. And I mean, Mike and I have discussed this before. I've discussed this with a ton of people. There's a lot of things that these films do that films today don't do at all. And that's not really a good thing. A lot of the times it is a good thing as a filmmaker or a film series matures and they remove certain elements or switch up certain elements. In this case, they've removed a lot of the things that made these films great. And I mean, there's not a moment I can point to that I was particularly scared or anything like that. It's just as a whole, this is a very well done series. And to be perfectly honest, as a non-horror fan, I don't consider an awful lot of horror well done. So that's essentially glowing praise from me.
Well, all right there, James. So, what is
Yeah.
your first memories with this franchise?
With Nightmare on Elm Street, I think I associate my earliest memories with nightmares, so it's really like I just always remember just struggling with my own imagination and trying to get control over it, which I think is why I liked part three, the Dream Warriors, a lot, because they kind of have to control their dreams. And I remember Freddy being just really scary to you, as a young child. And a lot of times you didn't even need to see the movies; just your imagination made it that scary. And then once I started watching the movies, I started thinking, oh, well, he's actually kind of funny, he's not just scares. Um, and that's basically how I got into them, I guess.
Now, did you ever get a chance to see any of these in theaters? Because I know in Canada sometimes they knock down the rating of the movies, so you can see. Like, I remember being able to see Daylight when that movie came out when I was like 12. So
And it's the same movie; they just like knock down the rating.
yeah, basically, I mean, they can say, all the dirty words, but if there's, a scary moment, they can cut away, or like kind of vice versa. So I'm wondering, did you ever get a chance to see any of these films in theaters?
The only one I saw in theaters was Freddy versus Jason.
And that was also the only one I ever saw. I was just not old enough to see Nightmare 6 when it came out back in 1991, which I can't believe the series ended, quote unquote, that early when you really kind of think about it.
Yeah.
Now, my experiences with these movies go back probably to about 90, give or take. I was living at home with my parents, and my Uncle Gord and we didn't really get along for a really long part of our lives together. But I remember one day he rented all the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, and I'm thinking, okay, that's where he's like, Mike, why don't you come downstairs and we'll like watch these. So I remember staying up all night with my Uncle Gord watching these movies and being utterly fascinated by them. Like, I was never really scared of these movies as a child, yet Child's Play scared the ever-living piss out of me for whatever reason. And I just remember thinking, this is really cool. Freddy's a funny guy. He's a creative, like, menace, and I just thought he was awesome with the guy with razors for fingers. And
You'd hang out with them.
Exactly. If I was disturbed with the Manson family.
And he's a good guy.
And I remember this is something very, very, very specific, because way back in the 80s, early 90s here in Canada, we had these big-ass satellite dishes, which I know you guys had way back in the day. And I remember specifically seeing an ad on Showtime or Cinemax or something like that that showed Nightmare on Elm Street for the Dream Master. This is just when it just finished its theatrical run and it was becoming available on cable. And there was just a really creative ad featuring Alice using the glass to look at Freddy saying, "Look at yourself." And I just remember that really grabbing a hold of me for some particular reason. With this, plus the fact the third movie had the whole Rockin' Dawkins song Dream Warriors, and I'm an impressionable little kid. I thought that was fucking amazing. So I just remember getting into the franchise more and more, and it took me a really long time to find Freddy's Dead on video, just because the local video store that was near me just didn't have it for the longest time. So eventually, it wasn't until about 1990, I guess 6, maybe 7, when I think it was Alliance I think it was Alliance Atlantis at the time released the big DVD box set for Nightmare on Elm Street. That was the first DVD that I ever owned, was that 8-film set. And I guess that's sort of my memories with the franchise. And I remember also just going out on the schoolyard talking with my friends, like, who would win in a fight, Freddy, Jason, Pinhead, Chucky. And I guess, I don't know, like, did you guys ever talk about horror movies like they were superheroes when you guys were kids?
Yeah, you're stealing my thunder there too. That was something I was going to bring up, because it's the same sort of thing as who's faster, Superman or the Flash, that kind of thing. We all did the same thing, and I mean, out of that came Freddy versus Jason eventually. That seemed pretty much inevitable, but I mean,
yeah, I remember talking about that for it seemed like 10 years before it finally happened.
And even recently, like, I'm still doing it. Like, in my head, when we brought up this topic, I'm trying to remember, Mike, I think you pitched it to me a couple months ago. When it was first brought up, we had recently done a Twilight special, and I thought to myself, damn it, in my who would I like to see Edward fight, I didn't put Freddy Krueger, because that would be pretty good too.
Yeah, because you think, do these vampire powers transfer over to the dream world, or do you have the memories of a mortal, thus you're kind of limited by your own memory?
I just want to see Freddy beat the crap out of him, to be honest. I'd like to see anybody beat him up. The Care Bears could do it for all I care. That's another story, though.
But yeah, what do you think of more versus movies? Don't you think there needs to be more?
Yeah, and I'm really surprised there isn't, just because there is such a huge audience available for these films. I mean, like, I remember when they were talking after Freddy vs. Jason came out, they wanted to do Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash, but it came down to licensing agreements. Who the hell cares? There's money to be made. Make it happen.
You know what? I even heard, speaking of the licensing issues, I don't know if maybe you guys know something more to this than I do, but I heard that the original idea at the end of Freddy vs. Jason was that when Freddy and Jason are fighting, they both end up in hell in the very, very last scene. And then Pinhead shows up and says, "Gentlemen, what seems to be the problem?" And then it goes to credits.
Yeah, so, I remember hearing about that.
Yeah. But it was a licensing issue. Like, they didn't have the rights to Pinhead.
Beyond the licensing, the other issue, too, is nobody wants their character to lose or to look bad. That's a huge problem with this. And that was one of the issues in the Freddy versus Jason versus Ash. Obviously, licensing is going to shoot it down beforehand, but it took them a long time to come up with well, I guess we'll get into it when we talk about the movie, but it took them a long time to come up with Freddy versus Jason where both characters look pretty good, because somebody's going to be disappointed if you have one just beat the snot out of the other one and that's it.
But it's like in King Kong versus Godzilla, when there's that rumor that in the Japanese version, Godzilla wins, and in the American version, King Kong wins, but that wasn't true.
See, it's weird though, because the idea for this for kind of bringing these movies together has actually been around since about the mid '80s. I remember I was listening to one of the Nightmare on Elm Street commentaries or something, or maybe it was Friday the 13th or something. They were talking about how they've been trying to make this movie since 1987 or something ridiculous like that. So yeah, I mean, it's always been kind of curious as to combine these characters into different mediums, and we will talk about this later, because there have been other weird crossovers. Like, I know there's a comic, I can't remember what company does it, but it's called Hack Slash, and they had Chucky in that, so I see no reason why they couldn't bring over Freddy.
The all-time greatest crossover is The Punisher meets Archie.
I do sadly remember that, actually. I think I have that issue somewhere. But yeah, so it's weird just to see how much this franchise, when you really look back at it, how much it's a part of your childhood. And I don't think kids today necessarily have these iconic horror villains that we had when like we were kids. I mean, all of us grew up in the era of Jason, Freddy, Leatherface, Pumpkinhead, Chucky. Who else am I kind of missing here, James? Who is?
Yeah.
Anything from The Exorcist as well was big when we were younger too. Obviously.
Yeah, it's only like Jigsaw now, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no charismatic villain for people to get behind now. And I know you shouldn't be cheering for a guy who slices and dices people up for fun, but there is no cinema, I guess, charisma left anymore.
I don't know if I'd agree with that totally, because I know it's a different genre, but the Joker has to be close too, in terms of a terrifying villain. Kids do that. But alternatively, I mean, look at the amount of Friday the 13th stuff, Friday the 13th and Nightmare costumes you can still get for kids. I still see kids dressed up as Freddy.
But I don't think they really get the same thing.
No, but I think when they get older, they're going to check out this stuff. And I think that if the 2010 film did anything right, to me, it's that it made me appreciate what they did in 1984 more. And I think a lot of more people are going to be drawn to it now because of that. I hope.
I think I'd be inclined to agree with it, because it kind of brought Freddy back into the minds of into the minds of people. Because it's been 7 years since we saw Freddy back in Freddy vs. Jason. So, and then with the remakes by Platinum Dunes, love them or hate them, it gets people talking again. Then you get kind of licensing from companies like NECA, Sideshow, Gentle Giant, and the like here. So it's interesting just to see how much these movies can reignite the fear, I guess, of these classic horror villains. But actually, I would like to throw to a voicemail from one of our other TWIG producers, Mike TFGN Blanchard from the Geekcast Radio Network. He wants to talk about how this movie scared the absolute shit out of him so much that the closest he'll get to a horror movie is, well, you guys will just have to wait and see. So, guys, we'll be right back right here on ThisWeekInGeek.net right after this voicemail.
This is Mike TFGN Blanchard from the TWIG Studios, or the Louisville, Kentucky TWIG Studios, I guess. And I'm calling in for the October monthly show of Nightmare on Elm Street. Let me paint you guys a picture. The year was 1985, and I was all about He-Man and Transformers and everything else, and Back to the Future and all that really great 80s stuff. And then my mom decided to make me watch Nightmare on Elm Street, the very first film. I was 5 years old. I refused to watch horror movies because of this experience. I am not a horror genre fan whatsoever. The closest thing to horror I come is the Blade movies. I cannot stand blood, guts, and gore. I just don't like it at all. And it's all because of fucking Nightmare on Elm Street. Another movie my mom had made me watch that really freaked me out was Witchboard 2, but that's a whole other story. But yeah, Nightmare on Elm Street, it is a classic horror film. Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger was awesome. But at 5 years old, you shouldn't be watching Nightmare on Elm Street. So that's my horror story, and that's why I want nothing to do with horror films whatsoever. And I'll catch you later.
Hey guys, welcome back to ThisWeekInGeek.net. That was Mike TFGN Blanchard's memories of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies when he was a kid. When I can't believe his mother would show him this kind of a movie when he was 5.
I saw Terminator 2 when I was 11, and that didn't scar me, but I'm a lot cooler than he is. So.
My first movie, I clearly remember my parents showing me was Fox and the Hound, and then later on that weekend, Friday the 13th Part 5.
Wow, my first movie was a little different. That was Masters of the Universe in theater, which did traumatize me in ways you can't imagine.
Oh, Dolph Lundgren, you're still my hero. But yeah, it's weird just to see how these movies affect different people like that. I mean, like, this one movie scared somebody off of an entire genre, and yet for people like us, Ryan, you're not a horror fan, but you can appreciate what's been done with it. And yet, people like me and James, this kind of started us down this really weird path where we would seek these movies out and find other really weird scares, thrills, or bizarre makeup effects. So, I guess kind of moving on along here with things here on This Week in Geek. Me and James actually know a guy who did a documentary a couple of months ago, back in May, called Never Sleep Again, The Elm Street Legacy. And we're speaking with Tommy Houston and Daniel Ferrans, and these guys were the creative team behind making this 4-hour documentary happen. Now, James, how did you get involved in this doc?
Short answer, I guess they asked me, but I was also, I guess I was also involved in, his name was Jason, so they wanted me to be in this one too. And, I was really impressed with the end thing. It was like the most extensive documentary I've ever seen about Freddy. I mean, it was like 4 hours long, and I didn't even know that before, watching it, but it was awesome.
And it's weird to see that there are occasionally horror documentaries that pop up every couple of years, and they're usually really, really good. Like, there was one that was done on the Halloween franchise a couple of years ago, and it's something like 2.5 hours long. And then his name is Jason clocks in just over an hour and a half. And then you get this movie, Never Sleep Again. And they actually went to the trouble of tracking down Mark Patton. Now, he played Jesse Walsh in Nightmare on Elm Street 2. And this is a guy who likely didn't want to be found. And now that since this movie, like, he's on Facebook, I think he's on Twitter as well. And he's just really excited that people remember him for what he did way back in the day, which is really exciting. So one of the other things that I want to mention about this is we actually did do an interview with Danny and Tommy on our website, ThisWeekInGeek.net. If you look back in our archives through our special interviews, I spoke with, I don't know, Ryan, how long was it? About 45 minutes or so?
Yeah, it was.
So go back and listen to that if you want to hear a little bit more insight into the franchise. So right now we're going to throw to another element here where this is an interview I did with Danny yesterday about Never Sleep Again. And here we more dive into his thoughts as a fan and as a filmmaker rather than the behind-the-scenes production of the documentary, as there is a new version of this documentary coming out or is available right now, which has commentary, some extended interviews have been cleaned up, and some other cool things, plus an exclusive piece of artwork done by the gentleman who does all the posters for the Nightmare franchise. So guys, we'll be right back after this interview. When we come back, we'll talk about the franchise, our thoughts, where it's going, where it's been, merchandise, video games, and all sorts of other crazy crap. We'll be right back, guys, right here on ThisWeekInGeek.net. Hey guys, what's going on? You are listening to This Week in Geek's topic show for the month of October. Well, guys, we are joined by some really cool people, as we are for almost every show, but I decided to bring in some real celebrity help with this month's basically topic show. And as you've heard over the last little bit, we've been talking about our history and our memories of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. I mean, with me and Ryan and James Rolfe, the angry video game nerd. And one of the people that I wanted to talk to for this was Dan Ferrans, and he's one of the people behind Never Sleep Again, The Elm Street Legacy. We spoke to him back in August, so I decided to bring Dan back to the show to focus a little bit less on the documentary, to focus more on the film series itself. So without any further ado, Dan, welcome back to This Week in Geek.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for having me back. It's great to chat with you again.
Well, Dan, I gotta say, it's been really cool having you on the show. I mean, talking about your experiences as a documentary filmmaker, but I didn't get a chance to really pick your brain about your thoughts about the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. I mean, this series has seen a resurgence in the last couple years, especially now with the new remake, which was just released on Blu-ray from Warner Brothers a couple of weeks back. And, you know, with your documentary now getting a new re-release with filmmakers' commentary, I figured now's the perfect time to bring you back and talk about the horror that haunted Springwood.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Happy to. And the other thing is, and I'm not sure if this is the case where you are, but actually the show will also air or has aired in an edited format on A&E's The Bio channel in a two-part special. Premiered last Wednesday and Thursday here in the States, and has done really well. I think it's been a lot more excitement around it now that it was on television. And, you know, it's the edited version of the show, but it contains, I think, the highlights, and I think it certainly driven a lot more interest in people going in and seeing what we did on the DVD.
So I mean, it's cool the fact that A&E would even air something like that to kind of get people talking about these. And I know you and your partner, Tommy, are known for doing these type of things. Like with His Name is Jason, now we have this, and perhaps something later on down the pipeline, which hasn't yet been announced.
Right.
So I guess let's kind of dive into it, Dan. So where do things start with you as a fan with the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise?
Well, God, from the original movie, obviously, with everyone else, I remember vividly seeing it. I was in the 10th grade, and it was the movie to see. I mean, and everybody knew that I was, like, into the horror big time, and I think a couple of friends of mine had seen it before I had seen it, like that opening weekend, and for some reason I missed its opening weekend, and it was a very limited play. It was a very small, I think it only had, they rolled it out into a few hundred theaters, but it wasn't a big release. New Line was just, hedging their bets on this film at the time. So, but I remember my friend saying, Dan, there's a new movie and you need to go see this. and I went, and I absolutely loved it. I remember just being absolutely terrified when he came down the alley and the arms started expanding across the walls and scraping those blades. And I mean, Freddy was just a one-of-a-kind character. He was nothing like the other slasher characters we'd seen before. So I think they really gave him an identity, which the other characters didn't have, although I grew up loving those series as well, and certainly had my mark on Halloween and Friday the 13th and certainly Elm Street now. But Freddy was really different, and I think what Robert brought to that character is what everyone remembers.
Now, let's actually talk about the character of kind of Freddy Krueger, because you have a very unique insight by talking to everybody involved in the movies, from Wes to Robert to even Heather kind of Lankenkamp. And I guess, Dan, where do you see the Freddy character kind of bringing out that primal terror that really fuels his legacy of being as one of the scariest creatures in Hollywood? Where do you think that actually comes from?
I just think it's because he's in our dreams. I mean, everyone has nightmares, and everyone's had those nightmares where you feel like, I'm never going to wake up, I'm never going to survive this, and when you wake up, it's like euphoria. Thank God, I just dreamt that. In fact, I had one of those last night. So I think that's what the universal appeal is of Freddy, is that he's that boogeyman that haunts our nightmares, and you can't escape it. Everyone's got to fall asleep at some point, and I think that's the struggle that the Elm Street kids have. And I think it's what people talk a lot about in our show was it's really attends to that adolescent struggle that we all face, where nobody's taking us seriously, nobody's listening to us. And I think that's a lot of what kids related to. I don't think it was just the Freddy character. I think that Wes created some really universal and really interesting teenage characters to be his foils or his victims. So I think that's a part of it. I think that's a big part of it, is the fact that Freddy is just, everyone relates to that idea of that phantom, that thing in your dreams that you can't escape, those nightmares that you never forget. And that's what he is.
Now, do you think maybe the thing that adds something a little bit more to the fact that he is such a frightening character, the fact that he's basically a child molester and a child killer, which is something I felt that was always downplayed in the marketing for these movies?
Right. Well, I mean, you have to put it in context of what was going on in the world at the time. Here in Southern California, where I live, there was a massive scandal going on here at that time with this McMartin preschool trial. I mean, it was national news, and it was like the OJ trial of its time. It was 24/7 on the news. That's all you heard about, where these preschool teachers were accused of sort of systematically molesting these children in their care, and it turned out to be a giant witch hunt, and it was horrific to think that in the early 1980s, that's where we were at, and wrongly accusing these people. And there was all these accusations of Satanism going on and satanic cults, and this sort of scare, this kind of, I hate to call it a red scare, but but a devil scare. And I think that's what people were latching onto at that time. So it was really controversial when Nightmare came out, and I think that Wes and Bob Shea rightfully really pulled back on those elements. But I think because they did, it made that part of it more subtext, that you had to think more about, why is Freddy haunting these kids? What did he do? You have that one great speech in the movie by Ronnie Blakely, and her drunken ways, talking about how they had to do Freddy in because of what he had done to the children. And you could only kind of read between the lines of it. But I think it almost made it work better that way, that you didn't have that overt, a flashback to him, approaching a little child, or God forbid, even worse. But, I think that idea of that lingering there and knowing that this guy had gotten away with this and that, there was no due process at that point, and that he was let off on a technicality. I think everyone can relate to that sort of vigilante mentality that would take over if something like that were to occur. So, and it was interesting to hear when we did the documentary how many varied opinions we heard from our various people. Heather Langenkamp absolutely thinks that kind of justice needs to be meted out in society against somebody like Freddy Krueger. She thinks it's very deserved. She wouldn't hesitate. She said, I wouldn't want that crime on my hands, but I wouldn't hesitate if that was my child to go after him.
And I guess that kind of brings up the kind of next thing. I mean, just the way that Freddy Krueger is such a villain. He's such this dark, evil character, and yet he kind of gets this sardonic, kind of funny wit as the series goes on, and people start to like him. He becomes the hero of the series, for lack of a better word. And I'm just curious to see, what is your opinion of the fact that looking at this character has this dark, very dark past, and then we just kind of latch onto him? Like, what do you think about that?
I don't know. I think like anything, as it continued, I think it became more accessible to people, and I think New Line certainly saw the value in the character. I think it was by part 3 he really became that kind of, Henny Youngman kind of, he's the guy with the crack in the one-liners, and I think Chuck Russell and Frank Darabont, to their credit, in a way, gave him more of a life and more of a personality, although they kind of skirted that line in part 3. He was still scary, and he had a great backstory that they revealed to us about how he was the bastard child, a son of 100 maniacs and all of that, and the nun, and trapped in the asylum over the holidays. Great backstory that they sort of, built onto the original storyline that Wes created. Yet, they were the first ones to kind of take Freddy into more of a, that lighthearted, that kind of, there was something vicious yet slyly sarcastic about him. When he comes out of the TV and "Welcome to Primetime, bitch," and all these classic lines that just suited. So I just think that they felt like, wow, the audience really responded to that. They took it even a step further when Rennie Harlan got involved in part 4, and I think it just built from there. I just think, like anything, it becomes a little homogenized over time, and I think that, unfortunately, Elm Street, in the later sequels, sort of fell prey to that. But I think when you look at the first couple films, I mean, I know part 2 has its detractors, but they did attempt to make Freddy a really dark character in that one. I mean, he was very much in the shadows, and he wasn't, other than "You Are All My Children," I think his lines were really, there was a sickness to him still then in certainly the first one, but even in part 2.
Now, kind of looking at the kind of sequels, as you did mention, things started to kind of change as the series went on, and I'd love to pick your brain. Which of the series do you think means the most to the mythos of Freddy, outside of the first one, to really craft him into the character that is loved by millions today?
I would definitely have to give that to part 3 because, again, Frank Darabont is such a brilliant screenwriter, and obviously he's gone on to such an amazing career since then. And that was one of his first paid jobs, and he, working with Chuck Russell, the director. And then basing it on Wes's original draft. Wes and a guy named Bruce Wagner wrote the original draft of part 3, but I think Chuck and Frank really took it into a more fantastic realm. I think they really built upon the mythology of the character. I think everything that we really kind of have known and loved about Freddy for the past 20-some-odd years is really built, first of all, on what Wes created, but secondly on what Chuck and Frank added to it. So for me, my vote would have to be part 3, because also the kids became so much more of an ensemble by then. We had the Dream Warriors, and I think the fans were really rooting for them. I think that was the group of kids that everyone really loved those characters. I mean, every one of them had a very distinct, very identifiable personality. Everybody related to them in some way. They were outcasts. They were struggling with their demons. These weren't just your average, jock and pretty cheerleader. These were kids that were really facing some serious struggles, and I think kids like seeing themselves in those characters. So I think they attempted to go down that road a little further. Although I think with Freddy, as I said, I think they got a little bit more, ham-fisted with him, so to speak.
Now, looking at some of the expanded kind of media, I'd like to bounce almost the same question back at you. Looking at the novels, the comic books, even the video games and other media, what do you think added the most to the Freddy character in that? Because a lot of people haven't seen the kind of television series recently. A lot of people haven't read the comic books or read the kind of novels.
Right. I mean, there's this whole expanded universe of Nightmare on Elm Street, and we kind of cover it in general terms in one of the bonus features in our documentary, which is really fun. We get to interview some of the comic book artists. Andy Mangels was really, really invested in the early days before comics and adaptations and graphic novels were really in vogue. I mean, Andy was really the guy pushing to tell new stories about Freddy, and he was successful at doing that. So if fans can go out and maybe on eBay or whatever, but find some of those earlier Andy Mangels written comic books, I think there's some really interesting stuff in there from the first half of the series. Really dealt more with the Dream Warrior and characters in the Dream Master. I think he took all those characters and kind of brought them into really interesting new places. So, and since then there've been lots and lots of those, and obviously Jeff Katz, who's a friend and really talented guy, and he came up with this great idea. And Jeff was, a new on cinema executive, young guy at the time, and really, really was the one that pushed them to make Freddy versus Jason. But after that, he really wanted to do a Freddy versus Jason versus Ash from Evil Dead, and which was a smart idea. It was really fun, and it ultimately lent itself more to the comic format or graphic novel format. So there've been a series of those, and anything. I mean, just the merchandising around Freddy. I think I was really surprised to see that there was a Freddy squirt gun, a Freddy, talking doll that children sleep with at night. I mean, they were so far removed from this child molester character, as you said, that was presented in the first movie. He just sort of became this weird anti-hero, and I don't know. There's something lovable about Freddy. I think it's Robert has so much fun playing the character, and he just brought so much life to it. I think you couldn't kind of help but, feel a little romanced by him. Everybody loved Freddy.
Now, I guess as my final closing questions here, let's jump forward to this past year. There was a new version of the Freddy Krueger movie which came out, which was still subtitled Nightmare on Elm Street, and it featured Jackie Earle Haley as the new Freddy Krueger. Now, looking at the previous universe compared to this one, where does the mythos go from here? Like if you could choose the direction that this series can now go in, looking at the new reality that's been established by this film, where does the series go from here?
Well, if you're asking what I would do, I would just forget it, and I'd just put Robert back in the makeup and in the hat, and I'd invite Heather to come back, and I'd just let him duke it out again, because that's what fans want. That's what the real fans want. They don't want that. They've spoken loud and clear. I don't think they accepted it. I don't think they want more sequels with Jackie Earle. I don't think there's many people who do. Maybe there are a new younger generation that hadn't been familiar with the first movie, but I don't know. It seemed not in the right spirit to me, only because Robert's still alive and kicking and is much of Freddy. I mean, he is the Freddy that we will always know and love. And I sat in a very crowded auditorium with him at a convention in Maryland not even a month ago, and somebody had said, there's really only one Freddy, and the entire room stood up and started applauding. I mean, I just don't think that they were ready for another Freddy. With Robert still with us, I think maybe 20 years after his passing, maybe that would be the time to revisit and give a new face to Elm Street. But for me, I just feel like it's too soon. But I mean, maybe inevitably they'll do another one, and I think Jackie did an admirable job. I think those are tough shoes to fill. I think he did a pretty decent job. I just wish they would go back to the basics of it, leave the CGI out, go do it the way they used to, old school. I mean, Rachel Talalay said it best. They used to do these effects for $5, and they worked. So sometimes I think less is more, and I think that movie was a good example of why I feel like that is true.
Do you think there's any hope at all for them to continue in the new Elm Street kind of universe? Because it feels like they took away more of the mysticism and the truly evil nature. Because I felt that Jackie Earle's character was almost sympathetic at times, and you could see where he went nuts to become
Right.
this dark dream demon character. But with Freddy, played by Robert, he was this laughing devil the whole time, and you just believed it. I mean, do you think
Right.
with the
Yeah.
new mythos,
I mean, I
there's
think
anywhere
they
for
were
it to go?
trying to script this. Yeah, they were just trying to script this like, did he do it or did he not do it? And then, oh yeah, he did it. I mean, I just don't know what the big mystery was. And if he worked at a preschool, then why was he building a glove? It just doesn't make any sense. You know, the Freddy we knew worked at that boiler room, and he, you know, worked among those tools, and he wasn't the gardener at a preschool. I don't know. I just rewriting so much of the history of it. I don't quite know where you'd go. I'm sure they'll come up with something, and maybe it'll be good. I'm always open to it. I'll be there opening night if they make another one, but I always want to kind of keep the faith as a fan. But really, for me, I think when you go back, and it's nice because look, that movie can exist alongside the originals, and you know, the people who love the Robert Englund movies will always love them, and maybe there's a whole new audience for, you know, a new series of these. But I guess time will tell. But if you're asking my personal opinion, I'd just give the role back to Robert and start it over again.
Well, Dan, I think you're pretty much summing up a lot of people's thoughts on this. So, Dan, I definitely want to thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedule to come and talk to us. So, if people wanted to find out more about your documentary film, where would they have to go?
Well, you don't have to go to any particular place anymore because it's in some of the bigger retail stores, but you can get it through ElmStreetLegacy.com, our website. There's a great forum on there where a lot of fans are interacting and chatting with each other, and lots of photos from when we shot the documentary and the people that we interviewed. It's a great resource, and if you're a fan of Elm Street, check that out. And then, you know, most of the major websites where you can buy DVDs sell it now, that's it. And look for it also on Bio Channel.
Well, Dan, I definitely hope we'll hear more from you, Tommy, and Adam, once again involving the Elm Street franchise. So hopefully you guys will consider some of the other avenues, as I've suggested 2 riff tracks. I totally recommend it.
Yes, absolutely. Maybe that's something we'll think about doing.
All right there, guys. Well, that was Daniel Ferens, who, like I said, was involved in Never Sleep Again, the Elm Street Legacy. This was a total recommended buy from me earlier this year. I cannot recommend this enough. Dan has been very gracious with his time. He's actually sent us a Elm Street poster, which will be hanging in our offices very soon. And thanks to him, I actually met Heather Langenkamp at the Toronto Fan Expo this year. Let me tell you, the only bright spot of that entire convention, but I guess we'll wait and see. But anyway, guys, we're going to throw things back to me, Ryan, and the Angry Video Game Nerd. We'll be right back, right here on This Week in Geek on ThisWeekInGeek.net.
And we're back to This Week in Geek's Nightmare on Elm Street special. And for the love of God, thank you for that interview, Mike, about Never Sleep Again. It's the Elm Street Legacy documentary on the series, and it is fantastic. We've mentioned a couple times that I'm kind of a non-horror fan. This is an amazing set, and that was a very good interview. You mentioned that, you know, off air, you talked to him for a ton of time. I could have listened to another 3-4 hours of that interview. I think that Ferens and everybody who worked on this just did an incredible job. There's so much info. There's over 106 different people talking about the film. And you mentioned that they had the people who did the original artwork for these sort of things come out with, you know, there were limited edition posters for people who ordered the documentary from their official website. That amount of care doesn't happen all that frequently.
Exactly.
Yeah, you've said repeatedly on our show that you're a sucker for collector's editions. This is basically the ultimate collector's edition. And I think even non-fans should check this out because it gives you a great insight into the entire movie-making process, whether you're interested or not.
It's really cool, though, just because when watching the Never Sleep Again doc, you really kind of get to see the passion that people feel for this franchise. And what I mean by that is, I mean, just talking to Wes Craven, They talk about the filmmaking process on how to create the backstory. Why do I want to do this? What makes this a good sequel? And you also hear a little bit of snippets about which movies push the envelope and how it even influenced filmmaking. I mean, look at the career of director Rennie Harlan, the guy who directed Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master. This was his second movie, his first big Hollywood movie. That later on that year, he goes on to direct Die Hard 2, which, you know, love it or hate it, still a pretty good movie. And, you know, it introduced a new style of editing into Hollywood, that MTV editing fast style, and it really created Freddy as this wisecracking Joker. I mean, think about the one line, "How sweet, fresh meat," and then, "Rick, you little meatball," and crap like that. And just, you really see how things change, and it was really cool to hear Danny and Tommy and everybody else talk about this. So, James,
well, just before you move on, I
Yeah.
just wanted to add the one thing I got to it from it as well, or the one thing that annoyed me that you just mentioned, the amount of care that everyone has going into this. I was ticked off when I found out that basically they did the 2010 film without anyone's blessing or talking to anybody.
Yeah, that 2010 film, oh boy, we'll get to that at the end of the show because it's rage-inducing. Now, James, you're a professional filmmaker, and you have done documentaries such as Follow, that kind of Marshmallow and stuff like that. Like, basically, you see the love and care that goes into this. So when you see movies like this, what other franchises do you see deserve this level of care?
Oh, like for something like Never Sleep Again?
Yeah.
Like how they did like a movie by movie thing.
Mhm.
I'd be really interested to see one done on Halloween actually, because I think that series it's totally a mess, but it's also really interesting just to figure out like, well, how did certain ideas come out the way they did, and why did certain movies not, the end result, why didn't it come out as the same way it was supposed to, and like it's just interesting just to know the whole process of what went on in all of them. So I'd like to see one done on Halloween.
All right, there, guys. Well, I guess, once again, if you guys want to check that out, I think it's elmstreetlegacy.com. I totally recommend you pick up this documentary. It's one of the best purchases you will make all year. So, guys, let's get into the main meat of the show, and let's talk about the franchise, where it's been, where it's going, etc. So, I guess let's look at the first movie. And there's been so much said about this movie, just how it was groundbreaking for the time. This is the movie that made New Line Cinema when they were on the edge of bankruptcy and everything. What was it about the first movie that really struck you guys as this was a different type of horror movie as compared to, say, Michael Myers or Jason?
I don't have enough room. There's not enough time for me to say all the good things I have to say about it. I mean, do I think it's the best in the series? Probably not, in all honesty, but it was the first. And there are so many things that this film basically started as well. Freddy, the character, you can start with that. I mean, he was creepy, but he was one of the first they actually gave any dialogue to. I mean, Jason doesn't talk. None of the others really had much to say. Freddy's the first one who was actually almost generally chatty to a certain extent. Granted, he was a little quiet in that first one, but he did step out of the shadows on occasion for it. So there was that. The other thing that it really needs to be praised for is actually developing the characters around him. This is something that is just not done anymore, it seems like. They actually had solid characters in this, and not just sort of the one-note people who are just there to get killed. You actually cared or wanted things to happen with these characters. And again, sort of kicking the 2010 one is some of the changes they made to these original characters. It's absolutely criminal that they did it, because in the original one, you could identify with a lot of these people. You could identify with the parents who killed Freddy, and you could identify, I felt anyway, you could identify a little more with Freddy in that movie, even though he clearly enjoys what he's doing.
Now, one of the things that I've always wanted to ask people who understand filmmaking and characterization is, what do you guys think about the way Nancy's character evolved? Basically, the the heroine of this movie, like when you compare when this movie against, say, John Carpenter's Halloween and Jamie Lee Curtis's character, do you think Nancy was the next evolution of that? Was she a like kind of ripoff of that character, or where did Nightmare take its stance with making a strong female character that you could identify with?
Well, it was one of the few to do a good job, I'd say.
But why is that, though? Why do you think?
Yeah, it's really hard to say, but it's, it's
For me,
Do I-
they took the time to build both her and her friends, though. You could see that there was some level of care there. It wasn't just a group of strangers thrown together.
And I guess that's one thing during the like 80s, and it's even kind of continued now, where you see one of the girls will almost always survive the horror movie, and it's always the girl that defeats the main villain here. And I always thought there was something very strong about the characterization portrayed by Heather Langenkamp for this movie that really kind of evolved the kind of genre. Because you look at horror movies made past 1984, just look at how strong the heroes have become since then. And I guess you can even trace this back to when Scream came out. Look at Neve Campbell's character, compare her to Nancy, just to see how things have evolved. And mind you, this is also coming from the same mind of Wes Craven as well. Now, James, can you think of, because you are a horror movie guru, are there any other characters you could maybe think in, say, from 1985 forward to maybe say 94 that maybe kind of had the same characteristics as Nancy or was equally as well characterized?
Sure, let me think. I mean, you want to see the characters earn their survival. So a lot of times it has to do with like the decisions they make. I'm trying to think of an example, like late 80s, early 90s. Let me think.
You could maybe argue maybe one of the chicks from Pumpkinhead, maybe.
Okay.
And that's the only example I can think of a strong female character who
With,
wasn't a complete bitch.
The one with Lance Henriksen.
Yeah, yeah. I'm trying to think of other genres that really kind of push it. I mean, Friday the 13th tried to, but they get to survive just because. And I think out of the Friday the 13th movies, of all the really strong female characters, I guess you could argue the psychic from number 7, but then again, that's a weak argument at best. Maybe, what about the girl from Child's Play? But then again, I guess that was always more, Andy was more of a central character as opposed to the mom, which was Catherine Hicks.
And they always kind of paint the adults like the dumbasses that just don't believe what's going on.
It's always the kids that figure things out, and the adults are 20 steps back.
Yeah, that's why we like the kids. So,
and that's
that Nightmare on Elm Street did.
And that's kind of something else. I mean, kind of moving forward off of kind of Nightmare 1. The parents knew who Fred Krueger was. They knew he was this evil guy. No one believed him. And then you look at the kind of the stronger role the parents take, say, in number 2, where they're actually literally characters in this. Mind you, they don't believe what's going on outside of exploding birds and crap, which was totally retarded. But I don't understand why no one would take the threat of Freddy seriously. If there's enough people complaining, hey, there's this creepy guy in my dreams, and kids keep dropping off like flies, why does nobody pick up on this fact? Hey, maybe there's something terribly wrong in Springwood.
Then everyone would move away and we wouldn't have any more movies. Jeez, Mike. Yeah.
Well, I just always thought it was an interesting fact that no one picks up on this.
It's true. And I mean, joking aside, though, I thought they were the most clueless in the second one, which to me is why, as much as I hate to say it, that's one of the ones that is probably looked down on the most, at least of the early early Nightmare movies. But I don't know. They got a clue, sort of, eventually, kind of. Well, not really.
Now, one of the things about kind of Nightmare 2 that I did notice is if you watch Never Sleep Again, it's always been referred to as the gay Nightmare on Elm Street movie. And there was a great article on cracked.com. They talk about the 5 gayest horror movies ever. And it wasn't until the writer and the director started talking about this, and then Mark Patton kind of giving his insight into the movie, that I kind of appreciate Nightmare 2 more now, as opposed to as when I did say maybe 5 years ago. I will say this. I did like some of the special effects in number 2. Like, there's this really cool life cast shot where Freddy bursts out of Jesse's chest, and each shot you see is a different effect. I always thought that was really cool. And where Freddy rips off the top of his head, where he says, "You've got the body, I've got the brains," and Mark Patton screams like a friggin' pussy. There's just something about that special effect I always thought was a little bit different, as opposed to something you'd see kind of later on. Because, like, you'd see Freddy chop off his fingers, and maybe you'd see, like, the face come off. Actually, what movie was it where the chick ripped off Freddy's face? I'm trying to remember what one that was. Was that number... There was either 1 or 2. 4, maybe? Yeah,
I thought it was 4, yeah.
I'm not 100% sure on that one, but I don't know. I
haven't seen these in a while. It's been like a year at least. Actually, it's a shame. I watched all the Halloween series this month, so I'm fresh on those. But maybe next year I'm gonna do Nightmare on Elm Street.
That would be pretty friggin' awesome. So, guys, you heard it here first. Now,
a big sequel thing. I don't know. We'll see.
But I don't know whether Nightmare 2 deserves the horrible rap that it gets these past couple years. Like, I don't know, guys. I guess thoughts on number 2. Like, do you guys like it? Do you hate it? Is it just the meh entry in the series? Does it mean anything?
I think I sort of liked all of them, I think, because even the worst ones have some kind of humor to it. But it's a really inventive series because it does something different each time, and the second one did something different. So I never really thought of it. I just took it for what it was, I guess.
And Ryan, what are your thoughts on number 2?
I think time's been kinder on it. I agree. I don't think it deserves the rap it got at the time. I guess I could understand at the time people being disappointed. And it also, I mean, had the distinction of it follows the original entry and has lost the driving force behind it. So that's obviously going to be an issue, and it's going to be an issue for fans of it. But it holds up pretty well. I don't think it deserves the rap it gets. There's some really fantastic scenes in it. And to me, the climax of it is as good or better than some of the other films.
I would have to agree with it because you can kind of identify with these people at the end of it more so than, say, the end of, say, number 5, for example. One of the things that I really think was particularly good about it was I liked what they did. The fact that they tried to make Freddy an enemy in the real world, which I know Wes Craven friggin' hated that. He's like, no, you don't take Freddy out of the dream. He's just some lunatic with like knives on his fingers. So I would agree. This movie does get a little better with age. It's still probably one of the weakest in the series, but not the weakest in my opinion. So I guess final thoughts on Nightmare 2. It's okay. Give it a second chance. Watch it with a more educated eye, and I find you'll appreciate
the gay eye.
Yeah, the gay eye.
For the straight guy. Oh, wait.
You'll notice things are a little bit kind of different here. Now, guys, this is the big one. Everyone loves this movie. It doesn't even need any introduction. Dream Warriors. Where do we even begin to start with this one? I mean, this is the movie. Wes Craven came back like, all right, you fucked with my shit. Let's bring it back to where it's supposed to be. And I like how they upped the ante. And this movie had so many writers on it. And in fact, Frank Darabont, the guy who's behind The Walking Dead, that awesome remake of The Mist a couple of years ago, did some of the major script changes along with director Chuck Russell. And he really upped the ante. This is probably my favorite movie. And you see so many careers get started here. You see Patricia Arquette. You see one of Lawrence Fishburne's early roles. Back when he was just known as, I think it was Larry Fishburne is what he's listed as in the credits, I think. So, guys, Nightmare 3, how does it stand?
Yeah, what the hell is with the cast? John Saxon as well appears, and then you've got Zsa Zsa
Yeah.
Gabor in a cameo as herself. I mean, it was ridiculous that they were able to get that much talent. And then you mentioned the behind the scenes talent, which with Darabont, and that's outstanding. I mean, it's no surprise really that this turned out to be pretty much everybody seems to like this movie the most, and I think that's in
I
spite
wasn't
of,
aware
or
of that
maybe,
actually.
yeah, and maybe because of, the addition of it. Well, I mean, it explained where Freddy came from, and his mother appears in this one.
One of the things I really liked about Nightmare 3 is it made the stakes bigger, especially with the line when they brought back Nancy Heather Langenkamp. She says, "You are the last of the Elm Street children," which means Freddy's been, he's been defeated in every movie, but you wonder how long did Freddy stay dormant? A year, 2 years, a few months, a few days? And the killing begins anew, and people start to take the threat a little bit more seriously. Nancy took time off to go to school to become a psychologist, and I know that's a huge time commitment. You see her on experimental medication, so you wonder, well, what has she been doing in the kind of midterm to get things better? Like, how long did the killing stop after she defeated Freddy in the first one? What happened to John Saxon's character in between that to cause him to leave the police force and everything else? So I think this movie builds the mythos up to such a wonderful level, and it shows these kids being proactive. I mean, the Dream Warriors, the idea is they can literally channel all their inner hopes and dreams into these abilities, like the Wizard Master, the Kid Will, which is somebody us geeks can definitely identify with. Mind you, I would have picked Superman or somebody like that rather than some pussy-ass wizard. But
Well, here's the question. Have any of you guys ever been Dream Warriors?
absolutely, in my own mind, I mean, if I were to fight Freddy with a dream power, I would probably use a power like, this is going to sound really retarded and identifies me as a super fanboy, I would probably channel someone like Goku from Dragon Ball Z. You don't have any things that can really break you. You're built on strength and energy. So it's not like if you're using, say, a mech suit like Iron Man, where he could infect your suit and kill you from the inside out. You're relying on fighting ability. And we saw this foreshadowed in Nightmare 4, where Freddy fights Rick in a martial arts thing. So I would use a power like Goku's to be super powerful. So Ryan and then James, what are your Dream Warrior powers?
Wolverine. I mean, well, think about it. Unbreakable skeleton, claws, can heal from pretty much anything. Hell, in some comics, he heals from being just an atom. So that's almost sort of cheating, though. So
I don't know, James. And what is your dream power if like you had to fight Freddy?
Well, I'd like to shoot lasers and I'd like to fly. But unfortunately, I've never really, not often in a dream do I ever, like, I've always wanted to have that, when you're in a dream and you're in a dream and then you take control of it. But not very often has it ever happened. And actually, in my adult life, I don't even remember my dreams that much anymore. Like, once I'm awake, it's gone.
So you don't know if you've ever dreamed of playing a good Nintendo game, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's all Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Yeah, but back then I had some moments where I was close to like fighting the monster in my dreams, but then like I don't know, it's like it just wouldn't work out. So I'm always disappointed. I wish my dreams could have been more
epic in
more
scale.
awesome. What?
They would be more epic in like scale.
Yeah.
And that's something else that this movie also did too, and I'm really glad, James, that you brought up the whole kind of dream power thing. It expanded upon the subconscious subtext here, because Freddy is a dream monster, and and like everybody has to sleep and everybody dreams, but no one really explains what does it mean to be asleep, to be in this dreamlike state. And here Freddy kind of crosses that boundary. I mean, with the guy who is mute, Joey, his weakness is women, and the guy Philip, whose hobby is creating these puppets. And you see Freddy kind of crossing that kind of barrier in the subconscious, that where he's in your head with all your thoughts, your hopes, your dreams, what you're afraid of, what you love. and he can use that against you. And I think that's a wonderful thing that this movie did. I mean, in the first two, it just was, I'm going to kill you. I stab you with razors. Here's some spooky imagery. You're fucking dead. But in number 3, the dreams start to get a little bit more elaborate. They start to get a little bit more weird. And it also, this is something I always found was really cool. And I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this. When Freddy kills you in the dream, in the real world, it looks like an accident or a bizarre unexplained death, where you see Phil, for example, he's got these tendons as strings, or he's being held up like this giant puppet. He jumps off the top of the roof. Kristen tries to kill herself with a razor blade. So it kind of gives Freddy's powers a little bit more depth that say, well, how does he make all these deaths not look like accidents? So maybe that's why the adults aren't saying much, because it's not really evident.
Yeah, that could be part of it. I think another thing that stands out in this film, too, are the set pieces, in terms of the room full of mirrors and things like that, which I think are some pretty inspired filmmaking, especially for the time.
Yeah, and
imagine being that kid with that naked chick comes on to him.
Yeah, and having her turn into Freddy and barf these tongues at you. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
So if you're a particularly sexual being in your dreams, can you just imagine the really evil things Freddy could kind of do to you? And that's something else too this movie kind of brings up. If this is what he can do to these kids and their dreams are pretty tame, imagine what he could do to a kid who's really screwed up. Then again, that's me looking way too far into the fiction. But that's kind of what I do. That's why I'm a geek. So I guess the thing about number 3 too, and that I really, is they tried to tie off the loose ends to the series. And if number 3 was the last Nightmare movie, I wouldn't have complained. They ended the story of Nancy. They ended Krueger by putting him in hallowed ground and everything. They introduced the idea of Freddy's mom, so they could have opened it up in other directions. So I guess, guys, final closing thoughts on Nightmare 3.
It was one of my favorites, and it's possible it might even be my favorite. So I was glad to hear when you were saying it's like one of the most popular ones, because at first I was feeling like I'd be embarrassed, like, oh, my favorite's part 3, but
No, you're definitely not alone. There's quite a few people like it, and I would agree. I would say it's probably the high point of the series. I mean, I still love the original, just partially because it is the original, but I would say from a filmmaking standpoint, with the set pieces, the kills, the characters, and just an overall depth to it, it was probably the best of the bunch.
Yeah, that's what's so great about the series, that with a lot of them, like with Halloween, it's like usually it's like no doubt the first one's the best. Like most series, it's always the first one. Nightmare on Elm Street, it's debatable,
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad this movie is so beloved by people of the kind of franchise. And one of the last things I would love to mention about this is I was so happy that they did an original song for this movie, which seemed to be a theme for at least this one and the kind of next one, Nightmare 4. Dokken, Dream Warriors, was the first music video ever included on a VHS tape with a movie, and I remember finding it, I think by accident. It was either at the beginning of the movie or the end of the movie. I can't remember where it was on the tape, but I remember wearing my copy of Nightmare 3 out because I'd watched the music video so often, because we didn't have the internet way back when.
Yeah, you realize you just dated yourself, and nobody can sympathize with that anymore.
'Cause I'm a dream warrior! Sorry.
No, not that. I mean, your lack of the internet. Like, I remember when it was just boards and you had to trade this info.
I got the internet in 1996. Fuck you. Moving on.
That's about when I got it too, like 96.
See? Haha. I'm not the only lonely loser. Sorry, James.
When were we, what's the normal age to get it, I guess?
I guess.
Now it's like 1.
It's like, your baby
my crib has
Twitter.
internet.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, nowadays, if you're born, yeah, I mean, you have internet right away.
And you've got porn right away. That's so what's disappointing is that we had to work for it. It was an achievement.
We grew up in the Wild West because there was nothing. We didn't have shit.
Pretty much. We were stuck with the NES and a lot of bad games for it, apparently.
Yeah, and you couldn't do any research on the games before they came out. When it's in the, Nintendo Power isn't going to say they have a bad game, you know.
And I actually, James, I'm very glad you actually brought that up, because this is actually a really good point to discuss the video game, because when you think about it, Nightmare on Elm Street, the video game, is more or less based on number 3 with the idea of the dream abilities. And I'd like to know, why was this game such shit?
I don't know. I remember it was fun when you're in the dream part, because you could throw the weapons and stuff, but then you wake up and then it's like you can't do anything.
There was more punching in that than in Punch-Out.
Definitely. You're punching like all these stock creatures, and you're going up and down the street trying to find like which door you're supposed to go in. And I remember that was the part that really like confused me. I just couldn't figure out like where you're supposed to go.
One of the big reasons it wasn't great is, look at, I got 3 letters for you, LJN.
Yeah, but unfortunately, LJN did everything, every movie,
everything that was licensed. Beetlejuice, Back to the Future, Back to the Future 2 and 3, Bill and Ted's, Friday the 13th, which was really crappy, Jaws, which was
all the Terminator 2s.
How about the Uncanny X-Men? That's one of the worst NES games I played.
Oh God,
it's crap. I know you're a huge fan of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, if I remember correctly. So they had that too.
Yeah. Oh, and they made the worst NES peripheral, which was the Rollin' Rocker.
Everybody loved. Well, actually, no. I'd put that up against the. Oh man, now I can't remember the name of it, but their motion sensor one that was basically like a battleship board.
The U-Force.
Oh,
thank you. I hated that thing.
I loved it.
Yeah.
Oh, you're crazy.
I got it to work.
I was actually surprised how well it worked. Like, it actually worked better than I thought it would.
It is shocking, but give me a controller any day.
Yeah.
This is why I hate the Wii. So
now, to kind of go along this path with the whole kind of Nightmare kind of video games. Now, there were good licensed games back in the day, mind you, exceptionally few and far between. But I don't know, like, why hasn't there been a Nightmare game since? And I think that's really a big question, is why, because the source material is so rich, they could very easily do any number of things. I mean, like, you could do an Arkham Asylum-esque game, you could do a point-and-click adventure, you could do something involving an investigation in Freddy's world, like you could do it like, say, the X-Files video game.
Well, I gave you the idea before the show for Arkham Asylum. I'm telling you, you reskin Batman into Freddy and run around and hack people up with the claw and scare the crap out of them. Instant hit.
Yeah, if you are Freddy in the game, that would make it way more fun.
Yeah, I don't see it being fun. I don't think it's really fun to be the victim, because then you've got to sort of stretch it out. You can't fix it so that Freddy's in the entire game and you beat him each time, because then he just feels ineffective. And then you've got, like, the first level version of Freddy has to be so crappy, some tard bucket who just picked up the controller and has played through the level has to be able to beat him.
Yeah, like, I've always wondered why they've never explored this video game universe again.
Yeah, and I think they will, because it seems like, you know, like with Back to the Future, they're finally doing that new game.
Available for free if you sign up at Telltale now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it is.
Oh, wow.
I'll send you the link after.
Okay. All right. But it just seems like they eventually get around to doing things. They just take like a long time off, I guess. I think nowadays they're finally realizing a lot of the, you know, potential of games that, you know, that
games
were made.
And franchise and characters too. I mean, I can't understand why there's not a Punisher game every year. Run around, shoot all the criminals. That seems like a winner to me.
And that was an LJN one again, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
The first one was, yes. The NES one. The only half decent one was
the THQ one?
THQ, which I liked on the Xbox, PC, and PlayStation 2. And now we're getting into the fact that I've played too many games.
Now, this is actually a really good transition point, because look at Nightmare on Elm Street 4, because this ties into the merchandise. Because after Nightmare 3 exploded at the box office, Freddy had become this pop culture icon where literally he got a TV show around this time. He had gotten lunchboxes, t-shirts, sweaters, talking Freddy dolls. Do you think number 4, despite being really successful, doing something like some, I think 50-60 million at the box office, the biggest independent movie at that time.
72 million actually, but anyway.
Yeah, but you know what I'm talking about. Did the franchise jump shark at this point?
Oh boy.
I don't think so. But wasn't this when Freddie started like making all kinds of like appearances on talk shows and stuff?
Yep, he did David Letterman, Arsenio Hall, I think.
You know what? This is crazy, but I had this dream like you know, a long time ago, probably well, I had this dream that he was a guest on the Super Mario Brothers Super Show, like during the live action segments. And it was so funny, and it was one of those dreams where you know, it's so vivid. I just could have like I watched this whole episode in my sleep and then woke up and it wasn't even real. And I've always like tried to convince myself that was real and it happened, and I've always wanted to find that, but of course it's just my whacked out imagination.
So
I would pay to see that, as well as maybe they could have crossed over and Captain Lou could have wrestled him.
Yeah. Before the scene I remember was at the end, that like fight with the mirror and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of my friends, it might have been the first thing I ever saw from the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, because one of my friends showed me it, and like over his house, and he showed me this, and I'm like, what the hell is this fucked up movie?
There was something about number 4 I always thought was very representative of the time. I mean, kind of looking back on it now, you look how much this movie appeals to people like us now. Like, it's that fast editing, it's the weird surreal shit that you'd see kind of nowadays. And I love Nightmare 4. I mean, don't get me wrong. And I like Rennie Harlan, but I thought the series just went maybe just a little bit too far in the fact that now Freddy's this wisecracking guy wearing fucking sunglasses, turning people into cockroaches. And I think I was happy that they expanded once again, the dream world to include, hey, he can turn you into crap. He can really screw with you. And I don't know, just kind of looking back on it now, I'm kind of with you, James. Like, this is a really fucked up movie.
Yeah, it's really surreal, like with the faces coming out of the chest and everything.
I think your question of, you know, whether this is where it jumped the shark is, well, I mean, it's basically for every person to answer on their own. I think there's not a definitive moment where it jumped it. I agree that the wisecracks were a little much, but some of the ideas, like the entire idea of people being able to see something and other people can't see it, or that sort of thing, is pretty freaky when, you know, at this point I would have been 8 years old. That's one of the ideas I remember, is that, or from that film, was one of the characters could see things that nobody else could. And that's, when you're a kid, that's pretty weird.
Plus, one of the other things about this movie is it wiped out the Dream Warriors in the first 15 minutes, more or less.
Yep.
Yeah, we got Kincaid's death, I thought was kind of cool, on the giant junkyard planet. Joey seeing, once again, the naked chick, man, despite being dead, at least his dreams weren't, you know, all that shit. I mean, I mean, he just drowned, more or less. I guess he got knifed too, but still, pretty lackluster death. And then Kristen, who got replaced from a Patricia Arquette to Tuesday Night, who also sang the theme song for this movie, Nightmare, which I played at the end of one of our elements there, was, I don't know, I found that that's what I kind of didn't like about this movie. It just wiped out the Dream Warriors one shot. So everything they'd accomplished by having these abilities was gone. And then Alice...
Kristen at least got something, though. I mean, before you jump too far, I mean, she was able to help Alice at least. But yeah, she still gets chucked into a fire.
Yeah, and it was just so quick to, and like, you have my power. And then everybody who dies becomes a part of Alice, aka Lisa Wilcox's character. So I just had this thought right now. This is me sipping the ether, or Blair's put something into my tea. If Freddy kills people and takes their souls, right? If Alice is getting the souls of her dead friends, Do you kind of see the kind of parallels here?
Shang Tsung? Oh.
But yeah, I don't know. That's just a random thought I just had. Man, that tea's strong. Anyway, sorry. But I just thought that in this movie, once again, they're using the whole holy ground thing and the whole God is coming to destroy Freddy. And then, I don't know, like number 4, I like it, but I don't know if I like it for the right reasons, if that makes any sense.
We all know Highlander did Holy Ground perfectly, so I mean, there's that. But it's definitely not the weakest either, I would say that. And it is generally looked upon pretty fairly, but like 2, it had to follow a much better version of itself with a lot of, well, just with a lot more talent attached to it. And losing Patricia Arquette was a pretty major blow. And then, as you said earlier, you wipe out the existing cast. These are the characters we actually know of. Within the first chunk of the film, it kind of diminishes things overall from there.
Like, I guess my big problem with like Nightmare 4 is I wasn't really attached to any of these characters. I mean, and the fact that they carried some of them over into number 5, which I guess, guys, closing thoughts on number 4. James, let's start with you.
I liked it still, but not as good as 3.
And then Ryan?
It's a pretty good film. It's got some good set pieces. It's just disappointing when you compare it to its predecessor, at least for me.
I think I'd probably be on about the same page. I thought it did some things right. 3 was a better movie. I don't feel as if it expanded the mythos in the ways that I would have liked it. But once again, I look into my fiction pretty hardcore, and I do expect a lot. Now, number 5 was The Dream Child, where they basically having some of the same cast here, like Alice and her boyfriend Dan.
Yeah.
They're having a kid, and the kid is going to be possessed by Freddy. This, I thought, was probably one of the weakest entries in the series. However, though, that being said, I do find later on it holds up better over time if you watch it now as opposed to when you watched it way back when.
Maybe. I mean, even Robert Englund cited this one as one of his least favorites, if I remember. So it's one that's not looked on as fondly. I don't know. I didn't really like it.
I thought there was a cool death in the comic book guy, but every geek's gonna love that one.
That's about it. I mean, there wasn't a lot good to it. Even the labyrinth, like the set pieces weren't there to me. There just wasn't a lot of things that I found interesting. I mean, I don't know. You see somebody get cut to pieces in the literal sense, and it's not all that exciting or interesting at that point. That's not good.
Yeah, I'd be kind of inclined to agree.
The way you said it's the best, that pretty much sums it up from what I thought. Like when you said there's just not a lot good to it, like you're not saying, it's bad, but it's just like, you're looking for something good in it, but there really just isn't that much,
Yeah, there's nothing that sticks out as poor, or I can't like point to somebody's performance or something like that and say it's bad. It's just there's nothing memorable like the others.
Yeah, it's just very bleh, for lack of a better phrase.
Yeah, it's really my least favorite for that reason, I think. It's just that I don't remember as much from that one as I do, the others. There's no real, like, good highlights. I don't know.
Other than the comic book guy and I guess the chick getting force-fed to death, I thought those were the only cool things. But it also seemed this movie had a lot less kills in it, too. And I don't know, I was really disappointed that the black chick didn't die. She was annoying as piss. I'm just saying. That's my negative point for this movie.
Ouch.
I'm sorry. I couldn't stand her voice. Just shut the hell up. But
you say that about me off the air.
Well, I don't know. But I guess final thoughts. Nightmare 5 wasn't the best. It wasn't the worst in the series. It just was very not memorable at all. It very much felt like a direct-to-video sequel to me.
I think maybe it is the worst of the series to some extent. There wasn't anything memorable, and that's not a horrible thing to say about a movie. It's just there's not anything memorable one way or the other.
So moving on to the last of the canonical ones, I guess, so to speak, Nightmare on Elm Street 6, Freddy's Dead. I float between loving this movie and hating this movie. I love the music in this movie, more specifically the Goo Goo Dolls.
The Freddy's Dead song?
The Freddy's Dead song by friggin' Iggy Pop. I love that.
I knew you were going to bring that up as the opening theme.
But there also is the Goo Goo Dolls, I'm Awake Now, because I think that was one of the first times they'd ever been listed on a soundtrack, to my knowledge, who would later go on in the 90s to have a really big string of hits. But
this was back when you would believe a movie's title, like, oh, Freddy's Dead. Okay, that's the last one. Then they're not going to make any more.
I felt this movie had the weakest cast. If that made I did not like the fact they brought over the guy from Aliens because he doesn't do anything. Yaphet Kotto. You also have Lisa Zane as Maggie, who's Freddy's daughter. It just felt like I felt kind of by giving him this backstory, it kind of took away from him in some ways. I like the fact that they talk about the dream demons, but they're given no real context. They're just like, yeah, do you want to kill people? Sure, you'll live forever. And that's the end of it, kind of, sort of, maybe. And I don't know, just some of the deaths in this movie I thought were hilariously over the top, like Carlos's death where he has his head explode. Breckin Meyer with, being killed as a video game sprite, I thought was particularly
It's definitely
creative.
a funny one.
Yeah, and that's kind of, I was hoping the last one would be super serious, but instead it's a comedy. Now you're playing with power.
Yeah.
I
look at the graphics.
Maggie pretty much to me just undermined this whole thing. I never liked the idea that okay, he's got a daughter now. There you go, and she kills him. Fantastic.
Yeah, and anybody who remembers that commercial like we do, the with the frying pan and the egg, this is your brain. This is your brain on drugs. And Freddy comes in with that comeback. Yeah, what are you on? It looks like just a frying pan and some eggs to me. Like that part just made me piss my pants.
I mean, this is the one that they definitely had the most fun with. I mean, as far as they do, this was the end of the series. Who cares what we do at this point? They know it's going to print money. I thought
Johnny Depp came back for that one in the TV scene.
And another thing that I remember, I thought the opening was particularly funny, where it's the whole takeoff on The Wizard of Oz, where Freddy's in the witch hat and flying by the window. I'll have your soul. I thought that was particularly creative, but this is another movie. It felt very underwhelming. If this is the way we're going to send Freddy out, do you not feel like it should be a little bit more epic than being taken out by nunchucks, ninja stars, and a pipe bomb?
It felt more like another Army of Darkness film than a Nightmare film.
Yeah, I think that's a really good analogy to put to it. It felt more like goofy, campy fun as opposed to
There's nothing really significant about the way they kill him. It's just when he blows up and that 3D face flies toward the screen,
And then the whole
that
dream.
should be mentioned too. This was one of the first 3D films.
Well, that had been released in a couple of years.
Yeah, it was the company's first, I believe, too, though.
Yeah, you mean obviously there's the 50s, but this was one of the...
Yeah, this was New Line Cinema's first, though, and they've gone on to do others, so...
And I thought the 3D for this movie never quite worked. And it was only in 3 scenes. There was when you're going through Freddy's mind, which looks like the fucking Lawnmower Man. And then the dream.
Oh, there's a good movie to compare things to.
I'm sorry, that's what it looked like. The Lawnmower Man or Tron's taking a dump on it. But it was friggin' terrible. And just there's something about Lisa Zane in this movie so unlikable. There's nothing about this cast I particularly I liked Breckin Meyer's character. I mean, I'm not a stoner, but he was funny. He didn't, and Carlos was you felt more for the victim of this movie than the lead character. That's not a good bit of filmmaking as far as I understand.
I'm not going to disagree with you. So.
Yeah. So, final thoughts, Nightmare 6 as the final canonical entry. What do we think?
Brutal send-off.
It was a comedy show. It definitely had memorable parts, but for the last film, they could have done better. but that's why we have the next one.
Yes, The New Nightmare, coming out in, I think, 1994. Once again, kind of bringing Wes Craven back for this, bringing Freddy into the real world. Now, when I was younger, I didn't like this movie. But watching it again now, I really appreciate it for what it is. I love the redesign on Freddy, how he looks more organic, like the things are growing out of his fingers, and how he's like some evil entity demon trapped by the fiction. I thought that was a really creative way to expand the universe, to kind of make Freddy, I guess, a little more threatening, I guess, so to speak.
Yeah, his new look was definitely, pretty badass.
Outside of his leather pants.
Yeah.
There's something about Freddy's junk cooking in pleather that I just don't find very threatening, but that may be just me. I don't know. I also thought this one had a really creepy kid in it. I love the fact that the kid gets right out to lunch in this movie. And the one scene where he's standing on top of the playground equipment trying to reach God. That's one of the moments I remember specifically from that year when I saw this movie on home video. And there's something about that scene that was unsettling to me.
Yeah. And of course this was not too long, like right after this, Wes Craven did Scream, and it seemed like he was starting to get into this phase where he was sort of making like more self-aware kind of horror movies. Like this is kind of when like the horror movies started like making fun of itself a little bit, or not necessarily making fun of it, but like in New Nightmare, how it sort of like they have the whole thing with the script and everything.
Yeah, how basically it was kind of breaking the fourth wall with it. And
yeah, that's the way to describe it.
I like how you mentioned how horror movies were kind of changing, because when New Nightmare came out, it wasn't too long where we get movies like Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer, and all these other generic horror movies. I think New Nightmare was the end of the Freddy era, obviously, because it was be about almost 10 years before we'd see Freddy again on screen as Robert Englund, not counting Jason Goes to Hell. I don't know how I feel about this movie in retrospect, because I do like the fact that it was Heather playing herself, and, her husband being killed by the Freddy Claw, and how it kind of brought him into the real world. But I would have much rather have had another entry canonically that maybe explored a different aspect of the kind of universe, maybe.
I feel bad for saying it, but I thought actually first of all, the whole idea I thought was actually really good. But Heather playing herself, for some reason, she actually put in a not as good a performance as when she was Nancy. I thought that was a little weird, or at least that's something that struck me. Outside of that, though, this one did have some memorable kills and memorable moments. Seeing Freddy have his tongue extend was not something I expected to see.
Yeah, I didn't expect that.
That was pretty scary. That always freaked me out, that scene with the tongue.
And it's well done. I mean, 1994 effects were good, but not great. But, I mean, that was solidly done, especially for the time.
One of the things I always remember about this movie was the fact that the kid used to put his little stuffed dinosaur at the bottom of his bed to protect himself from Freddy. I thought that was a really cool aspect, that there are these gateways between our world and the dream world, so to speak, there. And even something as simple as a stuffed animal, if you give it the power of belief, rather, can protect you from something like Freddy. I always thought that was... I thought this movie had a lot of really cool ideas and really tried to expand upon. But I would agree with, like you, Ryan, I didn't think Heather portrayed herself as interesting as Nancy. Nancy just had a lot more kind of going on, a lot more at stake, rather.
Yeah, it's something that's really weird. It's not something you'd think would happen if somebody portraying themselves rather than an actor, or rather than acting. I don't know.
But, so guys, I guess final thoughts on The New Nightmare. Did we like it, love it, hate it, or
Thought it was good.
Yeah, I liked it. It
not
was
my
good,
favorite, but
I'd say it's probably in my top 4. That's where I would probably put it. So I guess once again, flashing forward, going all the way back to 2003. Holy shit, I'm old. Ronnie,
I'm older than you.
Yeah, but I'm cooler than you. It's okay, Ryan. Ronnie Yu, the guy who did Bride of Chucky, did a movie which I saw in theaters for the first time. Opening night, I was like I think I was like the 10th person in line or something like that. In London, Ontario, I saw Freddy versus Jason. This is the thing we'd all been hearing about for years. We'd all seen scripts, drafts for it, ideas. We'd all talked about it, as we mentioned.
Jason Goes to Hell.
Yeah, where we'd see Freddy's glove. And that's where the idea really started to pick up steam. And it took them like, I don't know, what, James, maybe about 5-6 years to get things all kind of straightened out to make it actually happen?
Yeah, I mean, I never counted, but like it seemed like I feel like it was like 10 years or something, because like I remember like being in school talking about that, and it's like, oh yeah, who would win, Freddy versus Jason? You know, they're going to make that movie. They're going to have Freddy versus Jason, and you know, and then it sort of died down for a while, like, okay, well, that's obviously not happening. And then it happened.
And when this movie came out, I was so tremendously excited. And one of the big reasons we get to see Robert Englund fight Jason, but they actually changed who Jason was. They went from Kane Hodder, who'd been doing the role for a number of years, to Ken Kersinger, who is a Canadian stuntman, who's very awesome, by the way. And it used Freddy as the main driving force, basically manipulating Jason from the deepest depths of hell to come back to start killing for him, pretending to be Pamela Voorhees. I thought that was such a creative way to bring these two universes together, and I thoroughly enjoy this movie to this very day.
It's very sort of guilty pleasure, sort of cultish, but I don't think there's anybody that's not excited the first second you see them square off against each other. And then the final fights were pretty vicious overall, especially for the time. Yeah. There's some pretty good beatdowns in that. And by the way, for the record, I'll say that to me, if it wasn't for those meddling kids, Scooby-Doo style, I think Freddy probably would have won.
I would be inclined to agree.
Yeah, I mean, I like how they sort of evened out the playing field a bit, because at first, like, everybody would say, like, oh, well, how would Jason even stand a chance against Freddy, because he, you know, has all those dream powers and everything. But when they take him out, when they take Freddy into the real world, and, you know, that kind of evened it out. Like, I like how they did that, and I also liked how, like, they kind of use this theme of fire versus water. Like, you know, they each died from, you know, Freddy burned and Jason drowned. And every time you see Jason, there's sort of like a blue haze. And every time you see Freddy, there's like fiery red. And they had those two colors clash together as, you know, they fight. And I really like how they really fight too. It's not like they just meet up for 5 minutes at the end of the movie and, you know, they really fight.
Yeah, I mean, this was the battle royale that we've wanted to see, and I know, James, you've talked about this on your Monster Madness, where you get some of these versus movies, and they wouldn't even talk, like Dracula versus Frankenstein. You'd never see them actually fight. Yet here, it's, I'm gonna beat the shit out of you, and it's really
tearing limbs off and impaling each other.
But I always thought, though, Jason would emerge victorious for two reasons. One, he's invincible. You can defeat him for a little while. He just goes to sleep, more or less. And as they've established in Jason X, he can regenerate from almost any massive damage done to him. So what chance does Freddy have? Because when you think about it, when you bring Freddy into the real world, you can shoot this guy. I've got knives or fingers. I've got a sniper rifle. Or a shotgun. And I always thought this match would be rather one-sided, but once again, one of the things I didn't even think about is that Jason dreams. Jason actually has to go to sleep. And that just kind of...
Yeah, that was an interesting idea.
Well, even Freddy is surprised, too, after a while, whenever he realizes that there's actually something Jason's afraid of, too, and that was the water, obviously. Freddy being afraid of the fire, but, I mean, even he was shocked that, okay, he's actually got a weakness.
Yeah, like, it's just so intense at the fact that they actually kind of gave these characters a little bit more depth, despite this being, hey guys, this is fan fiction come to life.
Yeah.
With Kelly Rowland from Destiny's Child for whatever reason. I think, and that's another thing too, I like the cast in this movie. They had Jason Ritter, was in this. They had Monica, I can't remember her name, but she played Keena. She was the lead. Then we had Kelly Rowland, the guy who was more or less Jason Mewes, but wasn't Jason Mewes.
Yeah, that's right.
And what was the name of...
There's also a guy in Land of the Dead like that. That wasn't the same guy, was it?
I don't... I'd wonder, actually. I'm not sure. Who has IMDb open right now? Actually, now, just to kind of bring this up, guys, this just came across my Twitter right now, and it's a kill count of Freddy versus Jason versus Michael Myers. Who do you think has the superior kill count?
So you're quizzing us, basically.
Yep, thank you, random, having a Twitter tab open.
I would, without opening Twitter to your page, I'm going to go with Jason, to be honest.
Yeah, I was going to go with Jason, too, because it seems like I remember there being more characters in those movies, or more like disposable characters, I should say.
Stay within Freddy versus Jason. I mean, Jason kills more people, unless you want to make the argument that he did it because of Freddy.
I never even thought of doing that. Yeah, because Freddy only had the one kill, really, in that movie. But now, as it stands, from 1978 to 2009, Michael Myers comes in at number 2 at 111 victims. Freddy comes in at 43, average 4.8 kills per movie from 1984 to 2010. And Jason Voorhees, the kill king himself, at 158 victims from 1981 to 2009, with the average 13.2 kills per movie.
Not bad. Frank Castle's got like 1,000. Anyway.
Yeah, Frank Castle could beat.
Actually, his confirmed comic count is close to 10,000, but that's another story.
Oh my God, he's wiped out small cities.
Starting with yours.
Starting with mine. Oh no, not Shelburne. So moving on. So I guess Freddy versus Jason, I thought it was a really fun movie. And as we talked about during the beginning of the show, they could have brought in Pinhead into this right at the end, like where basically they both get sent to hell and Pinhead appears, goes, "What's the problem, gentlemen?" Which would have been amazing.
There's a ton of things they could have brought in, but I am still really happy and surprised they're able to even get this done. I mean, we talked a bit about some of the difficulties. I think it was very good, and I'm really happy that they actually put aside some of the potential issues to do this. I mean, if anything, I mean, who knows when the next time we'll see a crossover. We can't even see friggin' Superman and Batman in the same universe, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
So the fact that they got this done is astounding to me, and great.
Yeah, hopefully we could see more stuff like this.
I would love to see Jason Voorhees versus Michael Myers. If I had to pick two more people, or maybe Chucky versus, I don't know, who'd be a good villain for like Chucky to fight, I guess.
Barbie.
I always thought Leprechaun, maybe.
That would be awesome. Chucky versus the Leprechaun. James, make this happen, buddy.
Yeah.
But
or I just want to see one big Royal Rumble with all of them.
Man, that would be the best pay-per-view event. If you like, here, just throw $100 million at it, get all the villains, pay-per-view, $20. I'd pay for that.
Even if you called it Freddy versus Jason versus Michael Myers versus Leatherface versus Chucky versus Leprechaun or something like that, and had this really, really long title, you know, who's not going to go see that?
It'd be amazing. It'd be the most ridiculous hour-and-a-half movie ever, but it'd be so fucking cool. Come on, somebody out there must be able to draw this, make it happen. Ask the guy
who does Laidman.
Yeah, Laidman, or the guy that does kind of James's title cards, Mike there.
Yeah,
personal request. Anyway, so now that we've kind of gone through all the films except the new one, we're saving that one till the very last year. Let's briefly talk about some of the other things that Freddy did. Now, we have touched upon the kind of television series and the comic books. Of all the expanded media that I've been exposed to, I thought the comic books are probably some of the best here. And once again, talking about big versus SmackDown, they had one called The Nightmare Warriors, which brought back people from Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street into one universe to face down both Jason and Freddy with Ash, no less. And the ending to this comic book was really cool because one of the agents from the future gets sucked back into this Necronomicon time portal, lands in Springwood, and writes the proper information on the arrest warrant to arrest Krueger, thus negating history, so to speak. So I thought that was a really interesting idea, and I think this was actually based, and some of this was actually based on a treatment they wanted to do by Jeff Katz, but I think that was the original Freddy versus Jason versus Ash, which was a sequel to Jason versus Freddy.
As a dork, normally I'd go with the comics because I really like them, but having said that, I'm a huge science fiction nerd, so I got to go with the TV show just because I liked how they did it, this sort of episodic telling of 2 stories per episode, and then combine that with some pretty cool guest stars. I mean, first of all, you've got Robert Englund starring, which was a must, and I liked the idea of him hosting and sort of putting things in motion behind the scenes. And it was a treat anytime he showed up. But then you look at some of the people who were on that show, and like Babylon 5 fans will recognize Jeff Conaway, Tony Dow, Joshua Cox, and sci-fi fans will recognize Tim Russ from Star Trek Voyager. And they had a ton of people like this. Oh, and yeah, they also had Brad Pitt on.
Now, one of the things I loved about the kind of TV series, they had so many cool horror directors. They had Mick Garris, who's done work with the Masters of Horror television series. You had Tommy McLaughlin, who directed Friday the 13th Part 6, which is probably my favorite Friday the 13th movie, by the way. And then you also had Toby Hooper from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre directing the pilot, and even Robert Englund directed a few episodes himself.
Yeah, and I mean, and to continue on with this and pick up something earlier, go to hell, Warner Brothers. Why the hell is this not on DVD in North America?
Yeah, so
what the hell? It's Warner Home Video, and the reason is this goes back to, there was an interview about, it's almost a year ago now, with Joe Michael Straczynski, who was the showrunner of Babylon 5. Warner Brothers, he revealed there, does not believe in syndication, nor does it believe in DVD. Warner Brothers would actually let their TV shows rot than have them on television or DVD again. They don't care. They're not interested in releasing any of it. And he had to fight for years to get Babylon 5 on DVD. And I mean, that was a show that ran for 5 years and was pretty popular. And since then, it's done really well for them on DVD. But I mean, DVDs don't cost anything to make. I mean, it's one thing to not sell syndication rights and put shows back on television. You don't want to do that, fine. But it costs nothing to make a DVD. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, there was actually a guy I spoke to a couple of months ago. He was the vice president of acquisitions at Mill Creek Entertainment, Jeff Hines, I think. And he was telling me, just because people shop around these franchises to different people that want to put them on DVD, and it surprised me because Warner Brothers has quite the catalog available via DVD and Blu-ray. I mean, I just got Smallville from them, The Big Bang Theory, and other shows, and I'm surprised they don't go through the back catalog, because I think right now would have been the perfect time to re-release Freddy's Nightmares.
The breakdown for it is really interesting. Like, I recommend the JMS interview, but I mean, NBC Universal does show it on their horror cable channel. They have marathons every once in a while, but that's the only place to get it in North America, unless you want to import some of the...
Why is it on Region 2?
Because the rights are different.
Yeah.
So who owns the Region 2?
I think I'm not 100% sure. Like, if somebody wants to check Amazon.com for this. But yeah, it's really weird. And the fact that they wouldn't release this in Region 1. Now, I'm not going to lie. I downloaded this. And although I would pay for it, because I think this show, despite some of the episodes being better than others and some being batshit terrible, it's a show that should be re-released, and especially to tie into the whole Freddy Mania, which it kind of makes me wonder, is there a new Ultimate edition of the new Nightmare on Elm Street movie coming with this as a bonus feature, or a complete Nightmare set?
The complete series has never been released, and in 2003 they released a single Region 2 DVD. It was Warner Brothers. It was a terrible set. It had only the first 3 episodes, and it wasn't cheap. And unsurprisingly, the sales weren't great. So at that point, Warner's just shelved it completely. They never released anything else as they had planned to, and they have no plans to ever release it.
This makes me sad. See, I would kind of like, you see, James, if you could ever find this for your purposes, I'd love to see a Cinemassacre retrospective on lost television series, kind of like this,
Okay.
Friday the 13th, the series, and there have been other ones too. And it's interesting the fact that they don't pick up these like franchises for release on DVD, because I think people would pay for it. I mean, even if they were to release these over iTunes, that costs even less than putting things onto DVD, because then you don't have to pay for packaging, or Netflix.
Yeah, and to give it the rights to Netflix, I mean, that is dirt cheap. It doesn't make any sense to me. Warner's is the worst company for this. If you look through the list of lost TV shows, they're pretty much at the top. And it just doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, you look at all the people that were on this show, like Brad Pitt, George Lazenby was on it, and others, and why not get it out there at some point? And as with any like cult DVD set, the fans are going to buy it. I mean, we've seen so many TV shows that were canceled before their time that were cult hits and have gone on to sell like crazy. But Warner's just does not believe in DVD or syndication.
So hopefully Warner Brothers, if you're listening,
As far as TV shows go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Warner Brothers, if you're listening, I know at least the PR firm is that I deal with. Put this out on DVD. I guarantee you it'll sell. It won't crack the top 10 list for each month, but you'd make your money back pretty quickly. Just saying. And hire us to do the special features. Anyway, so I guess, guys, as we come into the final closing 10 minutes of the show, we've looked at comic books, video games, movies, television. Let's talk about the new movie here just very briefly. Now, James, did you have a chance to actually check this out before the show?
No, unfortunately, I just found out, like, I guess last night, that I guess Netflix gets movies way later than they come out on DVD, because apparently the new movie's out on DVD, but I didn't know, because on my Netflix queue it says November 2nd, so I guess Netflix is just way slower, so I have not seen the movie. And I usually, whenever there's a remake like that, I try to see it in the theater, but I don't know, I just heard so much bad stuff about it, and I felt really indifferent about it being made. It just, so I didn't see it.
Now, this is a movie I had the distinct, and I'll call it pleasure, of seeing this movie on opening night. This was back in April. I'm just getting ready to move. I figured, hey, what better way to celebrate my leaving Hamilton, Ontario than by seeing Nightmare on Elm Street. I love this movie. Freddy Krueger's awesome. Rorschach is a wicked actor. Jackie Earle Haley. This movie's going to be awesome. And then the movie started. 15 minutes go by. Go back and check my Twitter. I completely advise you to go back and see what I said around April. When this movie came out, I spent half the movie Twittering just how shitty it was. You know what the best part about this movie was?
Michael Bay?
No, going out to the bathroom and taking a dump. That was the best part of this movie. This movie was fucking terrible. I mean, they took everything that made Freddy menacing and scary, and the dream world being this utterly surreal place, and they made it suck. And here's what I mean about this, is the fact that they gave Freddy a sympathetic background. This is the kind of character where you'd wonder, is he guilty? Did he really do it? Did the parents of Elm Street kill the wrong guy? And that should never be a thing. I mean, in the first Nightmare movie, as we discussed earlier on, he's a threat. He is evil incarnate. There's no redemption for this soul. This is one of the devil's own. Here, Jackie Earle Haley, he's sadly a kind of a likable guy. Sure, he's a child molester and a diddler and all that shit, but you'd wonder, with the right rehabilitation, with the right tools, had we got to him soon enough, could he have been saved? In the original Nightmare movies, even in Freddy's Dead, we saw just how fucked up Freddy was. He killed little pets as a kid with a hammer. He killed his own father. He's evil. There's no question about it. Here, they questioned the devil himself, and he's nothing but this weak character who just happens to enjoy killing. And that's what I hate about it. Plus, they changed Nancy's background, where basically it resembles Nightmare on Elm Street. At least they spelled the fucking packaging right. But when you look at the movie, it's not a Nightmare movie. And I think that's what disappointed me the most, is I was expecting this reboot to be as dark and brutal as way things have been with the Nightmare franchise, at least the first couple, and it changed. So Ryan, you say something before I say something I'm gonna regret.
Too late. No, I didn't necessarily get all of that from it. My issues with it was still crap, by the way. I'm not going to disagree with your conclusion. My issues were, and I don't blame Jackie Earle Haley for this because I thought he did a great job, but I never got the sense that Freddy enjoys what he's doing or he's anything like he used to be. And part of that was by changing the origin, they changed his character, just didn't make as much sense as he used to. And it almost sounds kind of weird saying that about it, what is essentially a fantasy horror series, but it just didn't feel organic enough for him to change into what he does. And I didn't like the fact that they pointed out a lot of the stuff too, with the magic cave and where he was, abusing the children, et cetera, et cetera. I would have preferred they had actually left that to the imagination, that kind of thing. I think there's something scarier about that than spelling it out for everybody. And I mean, it wasn't well put together. None of the characters are remotely interesting. I didn't think that Nancy matched up really at all with the original. She and everybody else are pretty much one-note characters, and they go to this length to setting up some of these places in the movie, and then they don't do anything with it. The worst one, there's scenes like around the pool, that kind of thing, that it's supposed to be scary, but then nothing really happens. I don't know. And gardener at a preschool is not a scary occupation.
Yeah, there's just so much they did wrong with this movie, I felt, that it doesn't live up to the Nightmare name. And the fact that they didn't even consult anybody from the original movies, really. It's like, yeah, we're going to do it. I'm Michael Bay. I have a bigger dick than you.
Which is infuriating, and it doesn't surprise me with Bay, unfortunately.
I like Michael Bay. I'll say that. I like the Transformers movies. All hate mail can be sent to Mike at ThisWeekInGeek.net, by the way.
The second movie was terrible, and you're a bad person. Oh, there's one other thing I wanted to mention, too. And again, this isn't Haley's fault, but less is more. CGI diminished this film. It didn't add to it or make him scarier.
Yeah, it kind of made it stupid. My big problem whenever Michael Bay remakes is they always add this unnecessary dimension to the character. And one of the things I have a big problem with Friday the 13th is they turned Jason into a fucking master electrician. He was basically shopping at Lowe's before he killed all these kids. And oh, by the way, he must play Wii Sports because he's a fantastic shot. Just saying. But I don't know. With this movie, less was definitely more. Jackie Earle Haley did a fantastic job when they gave him the chance to do something with it. But overall, this is an incoherent mess, unworthy of the name Nightmare on Elm Street. You know what? I'm done. Let's stop talking about this movie. It sucks.
So James, do you want to see it now?
I really don't, but I mean, I saw the trailer at Comic-Con, and it looked all right. But I haven't seen the movie yet. I'm not a fan of all these remakes, but which one of all these new like slasher remakes, how do you think this one held up with the others? Like, which was worse?
This is by far the this one or Halloween's, because Friday the 13th was better than this.
Yeah, I'll definitely agree to that.
And yeah, I think it's between this and man, it sucks. I kind of like Rob Zombie, but Halloween's pretty horrible.
You know what? Here's what I'll say. This is the best movie overall. God, I feel dirty saying that. But the best is the first 35 minutes of Rob Zombie's Halloween 1. Once the mask comes on,
beginning or you like the beginning part
yeah,
better? Or
I thought the beginning part was actually really well done. I thought it was a great setup. I mean, sure, it takes away from Michael Myers as the shape, the evil entity that lurks in the shadows. But I thought it really added depth to it. I really liked the kid, and I thought Sherry Moon Zombie can really act when you give her a chance. But my big problem with all these remakes, it's unnecessary. I mean, they're fucking remaking Highlander. There's been talk of a RoboCop remake. You know what, Hollywood? I'm gonna say this as brutally honest as I can.
Come up with something new.
Exactly. Take your remake dick away from the asshole of our nostalgia and fuck off. I don't want a Ninja Turtles remake done by Michael Bay. They're going to have lasers shooting out of their eyes while wearing Nike sneakers or something stupid like that. You fucking watch. You watch.
I feel bad, but I'm willing to suffer through all of this just for more Star Trek. Sorry.
Okay.
I'm a huge Trek nerd, so I'll sit. Well, Ninja Turtles might be too much. I grew up on that shit.
Same here, but I also grew up on Nightmare, and it was completely unnecessary. There is only one Freddy. That's Robert Englund. So I guess, guys, on that note, we've pretty much said all we can about the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. Fantastic series, great canon, wonderful merchandising opportunities. But I don't know. I mean, would you guys recommend these movies to somebody who maybe is not a fan of horror, unlike Blanchard?
I would. No question to me. Sorry.
Your voice, like on and off, it's all the whole time. Your voice sometimes starts to sound like Soundwave. So I didn't catch the question actually.
Would you recommend these movies to people who maybe are not fans of horror?
You know, on one side of the coin, I'd say no, because they are very horrific and lots of crazy, surreal horror things happen. But on the other hand, they're pretty creative. I think they may appeal to others. So yeah, I'd say go with this one instead of like I couldn't see a non-horror fan really liking Friday the 13th series, or you know, I'd say Nightmare is a good chance.
Well, guys, I guess that is pretty much all we have to say about the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. James, I definitely want to thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedule to speak with us. So, James, if people want to find more of your stuff, where would they have to go?
Oh, thank you. It's just a plug. Oh, well, Cinemassacre.com is where I do all my stuff. So anything I do, you could find there.
Excellent stuff. So, guys, definitely thank you for joining us today on ThisWeekInGeek.net. Once again, brought to you by JustPushPlayArcade.com, ConsoleRepairGuide.com, and GameAccess.ca. So, for This Week in Geek, we have been
Ryan, the Uneven Flow.
And James.
And I've been Mike the Birdman Dodd, saying live free or die hard. And we'll catch you guys again next time, right here on This Week in Geek on ThisWeekInGeek.net.
Want to see me make bubbles with my spit? Sure do. In fact, that's the theme of our next show. So don't miss it.
What the hell happened to George Lucas?
Oh my God, there's snot on my face. And I'm your host, Mike the Birdman Dub, but I'm not a join. Not a join. What the f does that mean? F that. 10 seconds.
No, you gotta keep that.
Let's do this. Let's do this right the first time.
F you guys. Ew, it's in my mouth. Oh, God.
What's it taste like, Mike?
Water. Ew, salty.
Let's start this episode with a shat.
Okay, I'm good. Geico.
Holy shit. Oh my gosh. Freak. Die. Holy crap. Whoa. Whoa, my God. Whoa. Where did it go?
I'm like a stupid monkey.
As you can imagine, they don't let us out much.
You've been listening to This Week in Geek. Tune in next week to hear, somebody random. I don't know. Maybe even a hot chick. Yeah, let's go with that.
Did anyone ever tell you that you were very, very sexy?
Well, actually, no.
They never will.
Check out our website, ThisWeekInGeek.net, for more geek content. As well, subscribe to our podcast through iTunes or any podcatcher. If you'd like to comment on this episode, head to this episode post on ThisWeekInGeek.net and comment through Facebook Connect. Or you can call our voicemail line at 817-717-7202. Send us a Twitter message by replying to @ThisWeekInGeek. Lastly, you can email us at feedback@thisweekingeek.net. This extra music was produced by Pronobozo at PRONOBOZO.com. We'll see you next time, and remember,
lower your shields and surrender your listenership.